Welcome everyone to another episode of Data Dialogues, where we get to chat with leaders in the data space to talk about some of the most relevant conversations happening right now. Today, we are super excited to have Sadie St. Lawrence joining us. Sadie is a data leader. She is empowering the women in tech ecosystem. Most recently, top 30 women in AI and 30 most inspiring women in AI. Authored a book called Minds and Machines Harnessing AI in the New Era of Knowledge Work, which is going to be coming out in 2024. Sadie, welcome to the show. So happy to have you.
Thanks so much for having me. It's always great to have conversation, and I'm looking forward to today's conversation.
Yes, where are you joining us from today?
I am actually at my home base in Sacramento, California, and actually seeing some sun. So most people think that California is always sunny if you haven't lived here, and actually it's not, especially in Northern California. And this year we've had a ton of rain, and I tell people I'm like a plant. I need photosynthesis to grow, and so I'm really happy to be seeing the sun today.
That's awesome. I also see you have a guitar, and I'm assuming that is not a virtual background. And is this your office? This is like the coolest sort of office. Is that a harp also behind you?
Yes, that's a harp. It is my office, and I do love having my instruments here. And thank you for noticing. Recently, I have been kind of updating my lighting for some recording. But the paintings that you see also in there are my own paintings as well. So during the pandemic, I got a COVID hobby and started painting art as well. So I like to hang my own art on the wall.
That is so cool. So, apart from everything you're doing with women in AI, just, promoting the AI space, being a musician as well as an artist, we're so lucky to be sort of chatting and would love to get into, some of those topics later on too.
Yeah, happy to discuss any of them.
Um, one of the things which we really try and do with the show is really understand who our guests are, and I would love to, get a very quick overview of, what's your background been, what has really set you up to now, be in the position you are today. How did that journey sort of unfold? And we have a lot of sort of women listening in our audience. I'm sure they would really like to, know how do you break into this field, and sort of what did you do to do that?
So I like to tell people that there's no one-way path into tech and also particularly into data and AI. And for me, I had my own personal journey. It did start with music, as you can guess, probably from the instruments in the back. So my first degree was in piano performance, and then I got a degree in psychology, and then I got a master's in data science. And while they don't seem to have anything in relation to each other, in hindsight, you can look back and see how they've all shaped you into the person that you are today. And so for me, I really approach all of my work with a sense of curiosity and a sense of learning, having switched careers multiple times. But most importantly, like a scientific method in the way that I approach things. And so, what I recommend to individuals is really listen to that intuition of when it tells you it's time to change or it's time to pursue something else, and take action right away before that disappears, because that intuition is most likely leading you in the right direction. And for me, when I switched out of working in a neuroscience lab into data science, it was one of the best decisions I made, just because there's so much opportunity in the field, and it's allowed me to work in a variety of industries, from healthcare to consulting and AI strategy, and working with high tech companies and public service. And so for me, I really love working in the tech space, and particularly AI, because you can cross any industry or any vertical. And then founding Women in Data made me realize I have a whole entrepreneurial side to myself as well. And so that's been fun to explore, like this new lens of staying in tech, but also, founding something and going through all the iterative phases of that. So if I were to describe myself in 3 words, it would be, you know, curious scientific artist is kind of how I approach the world.
I love those three words. I think that we all get really caught up in building our business resumes, and what are we doing for work, and how does that play a role in our life? And obviously, it's very important. We spend maybe a third of our day on work, but I think what a lot of people don't pay enough attention to is that building your life resume along with just your business resume. And the sort of music and the artistry, this is very inspiring. How does and I love what you said about sort of it's difficult to go sort of connect the dots, and like Steve Jobs' favorite sort of very famous speech of it's impossible to connect the dots looking forward, it only makes sense looking backwards. How has music how is music, just looking backwards, how has it helped you achieve everything which you have?
Yeah, so one of the two things from music. One, or maybe three, now that I start thinking of it, more come to mind. Well, I'll just tell you and then we'll see how many points it is. One, with music, you learn to copy others. And this is really important in technology so that you can learn to create your own. I had a piano teacher once tell me, you have to learn all the rules so that you can break them. And essentially, what you do when you learn to play an instrument is you're playing other people's songs typically before you start composing your own. And the same method works really well in coding and in creating AI models. It's great to take someone else's Jupyter notebook and to play with their code, to tweak it, to see what's happening. To what used to be going to GitHub and asking for code and help, and now just, asking ChatGPT. But essentially, playing with somebody else's code before you create your own from scratch. The second thing that music did was really helped me be comfortable putting myself out there. And so when you're a performance major, you have to be on a stage. And so learning what it's like to share an idea or share a story in front of others really helped a lot in my entrepreneurial journey when you have to put yourself out there and talk about your mission and get people involved and tell a story. And so those lessons from piano are something that I carry forward with me a lot today. And then I like to say that when I was studying music, and particularly music theory, analyzing the sheets of music and breaking down a symphony score was my first ever analysis project. And so for me, music really gave me a love of like breaking things down and, taking a Beethoven symphony and bringing it into context of what are the chord progressions in a simplified manner reminds me quite a bit of how we analyze data today. And so if I had to summarize it, those are probably the three main lessons that I pull from music, but I'm always continually learning and growing within both sides of my brain.
Yeah. No, I think that as leaders, also as individual contributors, just people in like any walk in the professional world, I think we're something which I learned, which really changed my perspective, is we're always on stage. um, like as soon as you get out in the world, you're on stage, and if you're on stage, we want to see the performance of your life. And I love being able to directly correlate what music did in terms of being on stage, and how that's really impacting you and showing up on a day-to-day basis with women in data. And I think this is a really good segue into you know getting more into what women in data is, why was it founded, what's the aim, what's currently happening over there, how do people get involved. So would love for you to take us through that.
Yeah, so Women in Data started in 2015 and really started from a personal need. I was getting my master's degree at the time and was working in the field, and all of a sudden just realized there weren't many women working around me. And I said to myself, if I'm going to survive, I'm going to need a community of people. But more importantly, it's 2015. We're kind of just starting out in this space. Like this is going to be a big field. We need to have more women in the field and need to have equality in the space. And so really started with just a local community in my city. I led that for 3 years, having monthly meetings. And when you show up consistently, amazing things happen, and the community really started to grow. And that led us to open chapters across the US and then later across the world. And soon after, we continued meeting with one another, started to see a need for additional resources. And that's what led us to create our online portion and online platform, which has learning modules and pathways in data science and AI and machine learning to professional development of minute mentorship and leadership training and lots of opportunities for individuals to connect. So today the mission of Women in Data remains the same, and that is to increase diversity in data careers. And we do that through still our three pillars of awareness, education, and empowerment, really all with the focus of helping our members and community be able to connect, grow, and lead in their data careers. And so 9 years into this journey, it's amazing to see the lives that have changed, but most importantly, like the community that's been built and the impact that women have had in the space today.
Super inspiring. And how big is the community today? And if someone wanted to join, how do you take part? Is it how do you sort of give back to the community? And for those women looking to build a career in data, what would what would their journey be with the women in data community, and how would that impact them go land their first job in data?
Yeah, so the community is over 60,000 people, and the best way to join is just to go to our website at womenindata.org. And there's a membership tab where you can join for free, and you can look and find a local chapter. We have about roughly 60 chapters across in the world in 55 countries. But you don't have to be associated with a local chapter either. We have tons of different learning pathways. So if you want to upskill in a data career as an analyst, data scientist, machine learning engineer, and more, you can start on one of those learning pathways and learn with others. And then there's a lot of opportunity for professional development and job growth, whether that's through our jobs board, resume review, or participating in our leadership training or buddy program just to be able to connect with others. So lots of ways to be able to connect, grow, and most importantly, lead and volunteer within Women in Data.
Amazing. And you mentioned, you have a few different career pathways. You have data analysts, and you have AI and ML, and all of these incredible paths. Obviously, the world is going through a little bit of an AI, boom, and we've known that this is going to surface, for the last few years, but really with what OpenAI did on December 14th. And the only reason I remember December 14th as the date is that's the same date OpenAI launched on Product Hunt, and that's the day 5x launched on Product Hunt, and they beat us to the top spot. Obviously, no one will question that, but so, given it's only kind of been not that long ago, what are you seeing in terms of AI and where it's heading? And has AI become, the entry path for most people? Has that really overtaken data analysts? Are we seeing like most people want to start with that AI path?
Yeah, I would say on the AI side of things, what we've seen happen is there's a lot more awareness to the general public about AI and a curiosity of like, how may I use it? And what I would say though is for those who are looking to really have a career in it from the technical side, there still is a deep interest in either data engineering or even data product management, data analysts, data science. As from an AI side, there's many roles that build up to being in AI, right? It's just not one ML engineer or ML ops specialist. We know that it's a job family of people working in that space. And so what I would say is from those on the ground, once they uncover the layers of what it means to be in AI and to work in this field, there still is a high demand for the analyst roles. But what we're really seeing a growing popularity is really on the data engineering side of things and also on the data product management or like AI product management side of things.
That is so exciting to hear. And, I get to talk to a lot of businesses which are, mid stage, late stage, large enterprise companies. And, everyone today's got a little bit of AI anxiety and everyone wants to develop an AI strategy. And, something which I have to tell them is like, you can't have an AI strategy unless you have a data strategy first.
Mhm.
And maybe selfishly, I got to be one of the first data engineers in the world. It's very exciting to see that data engineering is really still very much in demand, and analysts are really the bridge between the data world and the business world. And data product management is probably as important as ever because every product is starting to become a data product. So to hear that those core fundamental roles are still very very much in demand, and AI is one slice of it, which there is sort of tremendous opportunity. It's not to say that there isn't opportunity in all of the foundational layers before.
Yeah, I think those who, you know, really start doing their work on the field, they may start off saying, "Oh, I want to be an AI." And then once they do more work in the field, they realize, "Oh, wait, actually, to be an I need to be in the job family of AI." And there really isn't just one job that makes you in AI. And so I think for individuals in the space, because of that, we're seeing even a greater demand for the data engineers, the data architects, the ML ops specialists, etc. And because we're seeing so many of these models just pre-built out of the box, right? I mean, anyone can tap in and use the GPT-4 model with an API. And so a lot of times too, does it really make sense building a lot of these models from scratch, particularly from the Gen AI side, just because of the computational power? And so I think there's somewhat of a less demand for some of the ML people as we can use some of these pre-trained models and more of the people who can translate between in the business or can build that data pipeline, etc.
And obviously you do get to spend you spend a lot of your time in the AI space, being chief AI officer at SSL Innovations, having an opinion on where the space is going. um, would you like to share a little bit of where you see AI is going? Obviously ChatGPT and all of these were really sort of generation one AI. What's really going to happen next in the AI space?
Yeah, so I think, you know, I like to think of it in terms of discriminative models, right? Which is where we were before. I think like Gen AI is version 2 of AI. So like for the longest time, for the past like 10 years prior to like 2022, we were getting a lot of value from AI with discriminative models. So like simple classification models, and companies, this were really like behind the scenes doing a lot of work and providing a lot of efficiency gains to companies. What changed with generative models and Gen AI in particular was now we could create. And so this opened up a whole wider audience to be able to use these tools. When you had something like classification, there wasn't much use for an individual user, right? It was only useful for companies at scale. And so AI didn't have the popularity that it has with Gen AI. Where I think that we're going to be headed and what we'll see next is how do we take discriminative models and generative models and use these in a sequence together to automate multiple tasks of work, right? So what that looks like is today you may use an LLM to like edit drafts or create a first draft for you, but how does it then take that and send it out to all the participants in a meeting, to get consensus for something, to create the PowerPoint, to do sales outreach, to update the HubSpot board, right? How does it tie all these tasks that we do together? So I see that as a next phase. Um, we thought that like multimodal was going to be take longer than it did, or things like the AI generated videos. And so we're moving quickly, and I see that happening very quickly. On the consumer side of things and on the business side of things, I think individuals are really going to be looking at how do we start to implement this and really get the gains that we're looking for within organizations. And so that's always lagging a little bit, the core application of what are the true use cases of Gen AI and where do we see those big efficiency gains. And so I think the majority of 2024 for companies is really going to be on that use case understanding, and then more importantly, that implementation. I think the use case understanding is a little bit different in this instance because it's not so much just building it into an app or building it into a product, but more importantly, training your knowledge workers. And so this is a lot of the context of the book that I'm writing. Is I think one of the biggest applications for generative AI is in the realm of knowledge workers. And the easiest description of knowledge workers I have is, do you work at a desk or a computer, right? If you do that, then you're probably your product and what you're using is your brain. And so you therefore are a knowledge worker. Well, what these generative models are really great at is they're great at knowledge work. And so how do we have employees start working alongside these models in really efficient ways, I think is the really big next frontier. And so that's where a lot of my work now is focused on. The Human Machine Collaboration Institute is doing research on how individuals can best work alongside AI, because the way I see it is for the next 1 to potentially 5 years, humans will work alongside AI. In the next 5 to 10 years, AI will do somewhere between, 60 to 80% of human knowledge work. And then I see like 10 years and beyond is where we really start have to merge with the machine, and whether it's brain computer implants. And I'm hoping that we have ways to work with AI that aren't implanted actually physically in our brain. But I think that is the next frontier then 10 years out. And so for me, when I look at those three stages of like working with AI, doing the majority of work, to then it like actually biologically integrating AI into our lives. When you think about those changes, to me, they're easier from a technical aspect than a psychology aspect and a societal aspect. And so for us at the Human Machine Collaboration Institute, we're really interested in looking at the societal aspect and the psychological aspect because we're at a point in time where technology can evolve faster than humans. And that's just because of the scale of compute that we have. But as a human, you and I are still stuck with our mammalian brains that actually evolved really slow. And we do have near neurons that evolve because of that, we don't quite evolve at the same rate as technology today. And so we really want to build these on ramps for individuals to be able to keep up with the pace of technology, and most importantly, stay in the driver's seat of technology so they can use it for good and use it to create the world and shape the world in the way that they best see fit.
Wow, that you did touch on a lot of topics. What is the three phases in terms of being assisted, being largely um, more AI based, and then eventually sort of merging into these sort of human AI interaction. And I was very curious because you mentioned the sort of 555 time year sort of horizon, right? Where we're now, where we'll be 5 years from now, and what's going to happen after that. Do you think with like the rate of innovation, as a practitioner myself, I was just blown away by how fast generative AI became mainstream, and we thought this was years away. But sort of given what we've seen in terms of the acceleration and just in terms of how fast things happen, do you do you think that is sort of 5 years still what you would say, or do you think that there is potential for this to become 2 years, 1 year, and then by the end of this sort of decade, like it's already here in terms of the sort of interaction and what Elon's doing with Neuralink, and that's just the beginning of like a whole wave of companies really starting to get into hardware. right? NVIDIA's advancements in like hardware, and just what we're starting to see in terms of the rise of like both hardware and software. So would love for you to
Yeah, no,
answer.
I think it's a great question, and it's funny. I recently read a report where they polled a bunch of AI experts and asked them when you think we'll see AGI. And before it was always like 20, 25 years, and then once Gen AI came out, it's like 8 years. People think, and I'm guessing it's probably even going down from there. So I think there's a difference between when we'll see the technology available and when we'll integrate it into our lives. And so I'm pretty confident in estimating the 5 year time frame because one, let's say tomorrow we wake up and OpenAI announces Q Star and it's this whole AGI model. One, we're not ready for it as a society. Two, there will be tons of regulations that will stop us from being able to use that, right? So I think that 5 years is somewhat of a conservative estimate given the lens of implementing the AI and seeing how it will fully change society. I think we will see some companies and more so countries progressing faster in this, and then others much slower. And I think that will be really interesting to see how that changes society and geopolitical matters. But yeah, when I make those estimates, it's more of like when we'll see the mass population adapted and how it will change work versus when the technology will be available.
Yeah, no, this makes perfect sense. And, obviously this is bound to replace some jobs. And this is something which, we get asked all the time. Hey, as a data analyst, what is my career? And like, as someone in like customer success or someone in a creative, a content writer or even, musicians and, songwriters and movies and, in any kind of knowledge based industries, and even probably one level further, the sort of at the sort of knowledge plus creative. And how do you see, the sort of obvious the job replacement problem, which AI has a huge potential for? What are some of your views on that?
Yeah, again, back to the kind of like 5 year landmarks. In the beginning, the first 5 years, it really won't be about replacement as much as more of those working alongside of it. And so I think in the first 5 years, a lot of companies will take action if it does fully replace an employee to retrain them and to upskill them into different areas because there will be a lot of additional work that it unlocks by implementing these systems. And so one of my favorite reports is from the World Economic Forum and their future job reports. And they estimated that while AI will, replace and automate about 83 million roles, it will also create 96 million new roles. And so I think also the upside of the new work is incredibly encouraging. Unfortunately, the role it replaces is not a one-to-one replacement to like transition into that new role created. So there will be heavy investments on education and upskilling and reskilling. And then I do think there will come a time, though, when it does replace a lot of our work, just given the fact of how many of us work at a computer and work in knowledge work. That's one of the easiest places for it to be replaced. And, some of the key areas that I think will take a little bit more time are on those human elements of thinking of someone like a therapist or a doctor or a teacher. Well, they will probably use AI to work alongside of. We as humans will still want that human element and human touch involved in the process as well.
Super exciting. And on the topic, and you did sort of that you did touch on this a little bit earlier on the topic of data and AI, right? Which are seemingly connected in order to have an AI strategy, you have to have a data strategy. Your data has to be usable, in a format which we can now go leverage the power. And, you spoke about these two separate types of models, what I call AI apps, what you were talking about, which is very traditionally what we have used, which is linear regression and segmentation and clustering, and that's led to huge advancements in sort of price optimization and supply chain and inventory management, and then the other side you have this sort of generative world, which is all of a sudden you have the entire power of the World Wide Web highly contextual available for you as an individual, and that's powering a lot of creative and sort of conversational BI sort of starts to become relevant, and all of the use cases with sort of generative AI in terms of helping you to code. So going kind of one level deeper, from the data perspective, right, from the world of data analysis, data engineering, what are some of the bridges, which we're going to start to see, and just even a little bit more of context. Until now, the world of the bridge between data and AI has been somewhat limited, right? Like every sort of data company out there is like, we have a sort of AI to SQL, bot, which is going to start writing SQL for you, and probably not something that interesting. But now, sort of conversational BI is sort of coming up, which is, I'm sure to the Tableaus and the Power BI is a real threat. Would love to get your views on this, and really, what are some of the other things which actually start becoming relevant from a company, from a business person sitting there being like, data is the new oil, and what do we do? Well, what's happening for that businessman who's or businesswoman who's like read the very famous data is the new oil? How is AI going to help them?
Yeah, I just recently, actually this week, my newsletter posted an article on this of like, do we really have the true value of data? And the reason that I think AI is helping with this is when you're starting to see how much data is valued by data acquisition costs, right? I mean, I think it was Google paid or is looking to pay Reddit $60 million for their data. And so right now we're starting to see true data acquisition and what you can then now quantify as the value of your data. And so the way I like to think of it is the value of your data is based on like a niche data set, right? So Reddit is a very niche data set because it's all very user generated and answered to question and closed off from what Google can search from the web. And then it's the size of your data, right? So it's a very large data set. And then the ability and the usefulness of that data is then the third thing. And so I think having those three frameworks actually allows us to quantify our data. And I hope now that because of the rise in popularity of AI, we start to see more individuals in business take their data seriously because they know it actually is valuable and is important. And so, if anything, I see the rise of AI just making the popularity of your data and particularly how we manage that data even more important.
And you sort of touched on something very important, which is sort of data ownership. And sort of Reddit has got this data source, which is extremely valuable, and they have an option to go sell it for sort of to Google for $60 million, like you mentioned. Should they do that? Like, is it still their data if they go sell it? And this is not just a technical answer, but more so from a ownership perspective, more so your end responsibility to your customers in terms of data privacy and data sharing. What are some of your views on this?
Yeah, so I mean, again, it really actually all comes down to whatever they had in their privacy policy, right? And so I'm guessing that in their privacy policy, they it gave them the rights to be able to sell this. Now, is that or does that do a harm to individuals? It's really hard to say because at the end of the day, it's being used in aggregate to train a new model. And so there's nothing that your individual data hopefully will be replicated. It's being used just as we as humans go to a museum or listen to music and we're inspired by that to create something new. It's to me really similar how these generative models work, right? They go and they take in and get inspired and then create new combinations of words or text or video and images. And so I think it comes down to a personal decision of whether they feel their privacy has been violated. But, given that it looks like the contract is going through, I would say they haven't done anything illegal because individual users signed their rights over when they decided to be on the platform, which is something we as individuals users typically do because we as individuals are all looking for value, right? So we're okay giving up some of our privacy or maybe giving up some of our ownership as long as we find value or find convenience from that. And so I think as like product people, it's important to remember that, if you do that, you don't want to just be going and stealing people's information. You want to be adding value so that they feel like there is an exchange.
And how would you, as a leader, someone who has a lot of knowledge on what potentially can happen with your data, understanding what privacy policies are, understanding that they can be changed, how would you, go about deciding to go sign up for, a future service, the next Reddit, or what information would you be willing to share in you as an individual, but also actually sort of given that we have a lot of business listeners over here, you as a chief AI officer, you know, are you willing to go plug a chat GTP 4 model on top of your company's data set? How do you really draw the lines of privacy, and what's your approach in like assessing the value versus this data is probably now no longer mine.
Yeah, so I think when you get into conversations such as these, it's really important to have multiple people in the room and multiple opinions. And it should never be something that's made a decision in a silo. And so that's not anything that I would ever make a decision of on my own on. Particularly, I want people from cybersecurity and definitely the lawyers. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, we have to get cybersecurity and legal involved, and that's going to slow things down. But I think that they offer a lot of great perspectives and have a deeper knowledge in those areas and stay up to date on what are the latest laws that are happening, but what's the most ethical. And then I think it really comes down to bringing others in the room, not just from the boxes you should check from cybersecurity and from the legal side of things, but also from your users. And so, we use user feedback often for product design, but I think rarely do we use it just on terms of like, how is it going to look and the ethics of what we're doing? And most importantly, is this something that you feel comfortable about? And so I always think it's really important to have a diverse group of users in the room to get feedback on those type of scenarios as well. Because as we know, with the alignment problem in AI, what may be a great response for you may not be a great response for me. And so, again, I don't think it's anything that should be done in a vacuum, but rather have people from different functions areas of the business and also have users in the room to share their opinion as well.
That makes a lot of sense, and you have touched on a lot of topics, and I know the book "Mind and Machines: Harnessing AI in the New Era of Knowledge Work" is going to go into a lot of these concepts in a whole new level of detail. So, looking forward to getting that book. I guess the obvious question on everyone's mind is when can they grab a copy of the book and sort of yeah.
Yeah, so I'll be done writing the manuscript at the end of May, and then the book is scheduled to be launched this fall. So I'm about halfway through writing the book, which is super exciting, and then it will be available for purchase this fall. So definitely follow me on any of the social media channels. I'm pretty active on all of them, and or feel free to sign up for my newsletter. That way, you'll be sure to hear about it when it gets launched.
And we'll share all of the links in the podcast episode and all of that fun stuff to make it very easy for everyone. Sadie, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom, and it was very cool to see how you're blending a few different areas of your life, obviously your professional work, but also music and sort of artist and empowering women in tech. I just wanted to kind of ask you, and I love asking folks on this. It really helps our listeners, but also informs me on what to pay attention to. But are there any particular companies in the data and AI space which you are tracking, which you're really optimistic on?
Yeah, I'm actually really optimistic on Tesla's AI team and really interested more so in the robots that they're building. I think they're really leading the way in this space. And, you know, one of the things I guess I should say in the future of how I see AI going is we're we're building the brain right now, but what happens when we take, like the GPT models or Google Gemini's model and we actually input it into something that can move like a robot? I think that is when things will start to get really exciting and also scare a lot of people. But yeah, I think the individuals who are kind of leading the way on the robot and also have a great AI team is the Tesla team, and I'm really excited. I always love their fall AI report, and so I'm really excited to see what they have coming out this year.
Amazing. Again, Again, thank you so much for being on the show. You've definitely added so much value to our listeners and just helping me stay up to date on some of the important sort of conversations and topics. So thank you once again.
My pleasure. This has been a great conversation, and thanks so much for having me.